Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter, or of course, you can subscribe to the channel. Let's talk boxing. Let's talk about the massive fight between TYSON FURY and Dillian Whyte. This will be a technical breakdown. We're going to get quite deep and technical, not on every single aspect of their games, but we're going to touch upon some key areas that could decide this fight. First and foremost, let's address this myth that Dillian Whyte is a clone of Derek Chisora, and somehow this fight is bound to go that way because they're just exactly the same fighter, right? The truth is they are nothing alike. Derek Chisora is a hunter, and he comes after you and he throws these big looping wide punches, and he tries to stop you from escaping out of the sides basically by doing that. He tries to trap you and then unleash what is quite monotonous in its tone of attack, but they're serious shots, right? Dillian Whyte's different. Dillian Whyte picks his shots, and everything he does is behind the jab. So let's look at this jab for a second, because this jab's no joke, you know. According to CompuBox, if you look at the most active leaders in the sport of landing the jab, it's Dillian Whyte who's in 5th place, and he's 2nd in the heavyweight division behind Alexander Usyk, and he marries it with a lot of herky-jerky upper body movement, so it makes it hard to land on him. This idea that he's just coming in upright, this big stiff guy behind the high guard, and he's just looking to throw these wide hooks like he's a brawler, this is not true. Dillian Whyte is a very good boxer. He varies the jab, he can double it up well, he's rangy. Of course, he's not as rangy as TYSON FURY, but he is rangy. He's smart as well with the way he tries to set up the jab. So, you know, this is a guy who can jab with the best of them. He's no joke. He's landing an average of 7.1 jabs a round, according to CompuBox. It's only 7.2 for Alexander Usyk, so he's right up there, and the average is 4.3 jabs. Now, this is in the entire sport, not just heavyweight. Obviously, the lighter you are, the more punches you throw. So although Golovkin sits at the top of the tree with 10.1 jabs, and Golovkin's jab really is an all-time great jab, right? It can bust you up as well as dictate. You expect a smaller guy to be throwing more punches. So, you know, Dillian Whyte's jab at 7.1 landing around is no joke. And I just want you to see this little clip here, that he's smart with it. Look how he jabs towards the left hand of Povetkin there. He's not aiming for his head. He wanted to engage the left hand to create an opening for that right hand. Now, the right hand misses, but I'm just showing you this to show you that this guy is a thinking fighter. Okay, so that's one thing you got to understand. He's nothing like Chisora, completely different style of fighter. This brings us on to what he does best, and for me, that's his trigger counters. When you attack Dillian Whyte, he's always ready to instantly trigger back at you. You throw a shot, and he's ready to either duck under a shot or catch it on his forearms or slip it and throw another big shot in return. You can see here, every single time an opponent really commits to a shot, he's in danger. That is when you're at your most at threat against Dillian Whyte. It's when you're trying to get your work off. He will swing for the fences. He'll get his head off the line because he'll dip really to the side and get quite low. But even here, you see the uppercut from Joseph Parker, and instantly there's this trigger left hook, and it's very short. His elbow's almost pinned to his body as he turns, and there's that upper body movement as Parker tries to commit and targets the body well. Dillian Whyte, he is of course known as the body snatcher. There it is again, that trigger left hook. But it's not just the left hook. It can be a jab, it can be body shots as I've shown you, it can be a right hand too. So we know that he's dangerous, and you can see how dangerous he is right there, dropping Joseph Parker, a man who had never been down prior to facing Dillian Whyte, a man who's got a monster chin. And you can see here as well against Helenius, that little clip there, that's quite a good clip to look at, because in terms of dimensions, he's not too dissimilar to TYSON FURY. So if you're talking about the sort of height and things like that, you're going to get an element of that in the fight. So you can look at some of the things that Dillian Whyte's doing against these guys, whether it's Chisora, Parker, who's a mover, or even the taller Helenius, who was a mover in that fight. You can see that his trigger counter works against all of these guys. It's not just the left hook, but that is the money shot, right? And this is a guy, of course, who has the power to turn out anybody's clock. But as fantastic of a weapon as Dillian Whyte's trigger counters are, they can be a bit wild sometimes, and he can be drawn out and made to miss, basically. Think of this, to use an analogy, like a mousetrap. You're a mouse and you've seen a lump of cheese in that trap and it looks scrumptious, right? And you want a bit of a bite of that cheddar cheese. Well, you better make sure you grab that cheese and get out before that mousetrap snaps down and breaks your neck. Well, this is kind of like fighting Dillian Whyte. You can see that Joseph Parker is on the edge of range. He'll land his big shots. Dillian Whyte will swing for the fences. And as I showed you before, he can be very dangerous with that trigger counter. But as you can see again here against a taller guy in Helenius who's setting him up, he can often fall short as well. Now, he is relentless and incessant with it. So he does look to wear you down. He applies a lot of foot pressure. Dillian Whyte, there's a lot of that herky-jerky movement, like I said. So he's not an easy target to land on unless you commit. That's the key here. Had Dillian Whyte not had the upper body movement, he would have been quite easy to pop with the jab at range and move away. But because he's got that herky-jerky movement, in order to really land and really commit, rather than just flick out a jab, you need to hold your feet a little bit more or get your feet in a bit closer, which brings you into his wheelhouse. What that means is that you need to be a little bit closer to that mousetrap. You can't just reach in from afar and grab it. You need to get quite up close and personal, grab that cheese and then try and run out quickly. Now, often it can work, but as I showed you before, often it does not work. So let's talk about how you potentially force this issue. How do you make Dillian Whyte miss you, essentially? Well, first and foremost, let's talk about his guard. Ignore that little caption there at the bottom that should have said Whyte's reactive guard pattern. You see, Dillian Whyte has quite a low hanging sort of languid style with his arms, and like I showed you, he likes to shoot the jab. He's very consistent with the jab, the second most consistent heavyweight in terms of landing a jab according to CompuBox. But he is also a guy who likes to cover up with a high guard when he feels like he's going to be engaged with something big. That is the method he uses to catch and counter. So he's responsive to what the opponent's doing. In this particular first clip here, you see how he engages the jab of Joseph Parker by patting it down. So his arms are low, but when he feels like a threat's going to come or he's going to look like he wants to catch and counter, his go-to position, the guard he uses most often, is this high guard here where he responds with a high guard. You see that there? So Joseph Parker threw a feint there and Dillian Whyte prepared to cover up. Now, as he does that, he brings his gloves close together, as you can see here. You see how his gloves come close together? His hands almost crossed there. This cuts off the trajectory for the center line. And there, when Joseph Parker tried to follow it up with an over-the-top right hand, he was aware of that and he tried to come underneath and then rise with a counter. The benefit of having this sort of guard where he's reacting and turning into a high guard is that he's able to maintain that lucid languid style. A lot of guys that have a constant high guard and fight out of that high guard, they're a little bit more limited in terms of their motion when it comes to what punches they can execute. And also sometimes when you're throwing a jab from low, because it's coming from a low peripheral vision area, you don't see it till late, so it can give you a more accurate jab. You know, a lot of fighters prefer to throw a jab from low to high, so it just gives him more variation. The negative compared to a typical high guard is that he has to correct his position, so to speak. If your left hand's all the way down by your knee and you're sort of feinting or wobbling it around by your hips and you suddenly want to enter a high guard, you've got to bring your arm all the way back up to your face. So it takes a split second longer to do. And so what can happen is, as you're reacting, you've got a split second to decide what it is that's coming your way for you to cover up. Now, it does cover up much of your body, but what happens is as you come up to your face, to the front of your face, and you bring those gloves together, you're leaving space in on the sides. You understand? So what can happen is that a guy can force you, in a sense, to react, to create openings. So like there, that clip you just saw there, Joseph Parker threw a jab. He knew that Whyte's arms were going to come in and close up, as he's done again there, and he's raised his elbows because he wants to cover his entire head. Well, that leaves space in below and to the sides. So on both occasions, Joseph Parker threw a right hook to the body. And of course, you still saw there that Dillian Whyte was willing to instantly trigger that counter, but nonetheless, he still ate that body shot, right? So the negative of trying to react to fall into that high guard is that you need longer and you can be more easily manipulated. But in general, having a high guard means that you're going to respond to what a guy does, but there's going to be a certain pattern to the way you respond. So what type of fighter, what type of skill set is going to be able to draw that out of Dillian Whyte in order to be able to work off of that and counter what he's trying to do to defend himself? TYSON FURY is fantastic with feints, throwaways, and variations. And these are things that can get you to bite and get you to respond. Now, Deontay Wilder responds to things very differently to Dillian Whyte. You can see here when he's biting to the feints, he's moving backwards. But the fact of the matter is he's biting. You see that? That little step back? Dillian Whyte there might have covered up and waited to counter. But the point is he was expecting something to come that didn't come. Now, if you don't respond, that's what happens. You see that powerful jab there? If you don't respond and you just think, it's just a feint, I'm not going to bite to the feint, you can get seriously punished with a powerful jab. The point is, however, there's a little step feint and then a powerful jab again. That time it was more of a throwaway jab to line up the right hand. The point is, however, you're trying to read what this guy is doing in order to be able to respond. Now, whether you're going to respond defensively the way Deontay Wilder did and sought to move back, or whether you're going to seek to capitalize and throw a trigger counterpunch like Dillian Whyte would do, you have to know what kind of shot is coming. Because if it's a throwaway jab, and there's nothing on it, and he's seeking to maintain distance, and he's not actually seeking to commit to a shot, and you decide to cover up, come down, and then come up with a big hook, you're going to fall short. And that's when you can start to get countered. Now, here's an example of Tyson Fury using feints and throwaways in order to manipulate the guard of Deontay Wilder. He's trying to get Wilder to move his hands. Now, in this particular case, Dillian Whyte would throw back. He wouldn't do what Wilder's doing. So Fury couldn't quite be as close as this. He wouldn't get away with it. But you have to try and understand the concept of what's happening in this particular sequence. So first and foremost, you see here that Fury throws a throwaway jab through the guard. There's nothing on that. It's just to get Wilder to react. And you can see it splits the guard. Wilder now realizes that was a throwaway. So he tries to recover by bringing his guard back in front of his face. But it was actually a hook that was coming through. And it was more of a slap, really. But it enabled the right hand. Now let's go back to this exchange with Christian Hammer. The video went a bit too fast compared to what I was able to speak there, but this is out of a southpaw position, which we'll get to later, by the way. But you can see that he throws a jab with not much on it, just to touch the guard, which opens up the guard that enables him to go through the middle. You see that? Here you see him touch the front and then come around. So by touching the front of the guard, almost like he was going to flick the forehead, he's able to bring Hammer's guard in front of him. Then he went around with another throwaway left hook. There wasn't much on it, but it's keeping Hammer guessing. He then landed that jab through the guard. That one, last one, didn't have much on it at all. But you see how he's toying with it. He's not letting him know which way he's going to go. Is something powerful going to come? And then if Hammer tries to launch, there's that counter right hand, and he falls back, Tyson Fury, to escape. You see there, that little feint? So while Hammer there has created a closing off of a path for the jab through the middle, he's opened up space around the side. There's space to the solar plexus. There's also, although Tyson Fury is not in a position for this, there's also potentially a space for an uppercut through the middle of the elbows. There's also, of course, the sides here. So he's created an opening by a single feint. So then as Hammer goes to open up the guard to get back into a stance so he can carry on fighting, so he's in a position to punch and in a position to see Fury, because he's blinded himself by bringing his own guard in front of his eyes, something that Dillian Whyte also does. As he's opened up that guard, then he fires the jab directly through the middle. So that slight delay of that feint caused the reaction. He capitalized on that reaction. Kind of like a puppeteer pulling the strings. You see that? Left hook around the guard and then a left hook to the body, or a left uppercut to the body, not much on it, but it's a poke. These things add up, and he sticks his tongue out. But you see that last attack there again, I want to show you something. This is something that you could end up seeing if he's backs up against the ropes. Here's Tyson Fury back up against the ropes. What's going to happen here? You can see that sort of guard. He's waiting for a trigger to counter. This is something that you could see Dillian Whyte in this sort of position, right? You could see this happening. He shoots that jab after a feint and he lands flush. He gets through. Just like Dillian Whyte, Hammer's now ready to launch an attack. Tyson Fury is ready to use those lax ropes to lean back off the ropes, land another little shot, and then try and escape. In that moment where he's trying to escape, that's an area that Whyte could potentially have success. But he's going to have to read those throwaways and those feints. Otherwise, he's going to be in that sort of situation like Hammer, where he's going to have to eat a shot, basically to get one off himself. Now, make no mistake, Dillian Whyte isn't Christian Hammer, right? Dillian Whyte's a much better fighter, a much bigger puncher. I'm just trying to show you the dynamics of certain things that could play out here. Now, moving on from that, let's talk a little bit about Fury's weaknesses in this regard and where Dillian Whyte could capitalize, because one of the things that Tyson Fury is often open to is hooks when he is getting on the front foot and trying to initiate attacks. He's usually doing this when a guy is potentially hurt, or when Fury smelled blood, or he really wants to up the tempo. He can do it sometimes just because he gets lazy, but often it's when he's trying to hunt someone down and he's smelled blood. Now, I watched Hatman's preview, brilliant preview, check it out. He was saying that maybe Dillian Whyte should act as though he's been hurt. Now, I totally agree with Hatman, and this is something that I've touched upon in the past as well. When I was doing my preview for the third Fury Wilder fight, I believe it was, I was talking about how you can potentially play possum against Tyson Fury because he was open to high left hooks, and that was something that Wilder was working on with Malik Scott. So maybe that was an area he wanted to go down. Now, I'm going to show you why this could potentially work. It should be in a round you're already losing, of course, because the judges won't know that you're fake hurt, so you could end up swinging around to Tyson Fury. But the point is, if he thinks you're hurt and he's going for blood, if things aren't going your way and you need a plan B, sometimes he can get a little bit lazy with the way he enters. But it's down to technique. It's not just about lazy. The way he swings those long levers around to throw hooks, they're not tight hooks. They're usually swinging. He's using the momentum of his entire movement to generate the power. So let me just show you what I'm talking about here. You see how open he is there to that check left hook? He missed that, Wilder. But look again how that big wide hook comes around. I'll show you better examples in a moment. But when he's trying to initiate flurries, you'll see it. See how he came in there with a low left hand? He's coming in almost gangly. You see it here as well. Wide right, low hands. Look at this. Now, Deontay Wilder is moving backwards. He's, a slimmer, thinner man than Dillian Whyte. But Dillian Whyte would hold his feet. Now, here it's different because Fury's mauling him, so he's affecting his balance. If you're affecting someone's balance and you're coming in like that, then I understand it. But otherwise, that wide right hook from range, or here, you see how he bounces in. Look how low his lead hand is. You could potentially line him up for an over-the-top right hand. And that over-the-top right hand that Whyte likes to throw, he can find success with that against this particular opponent, stylistically speaking as well. There, look how open those the arcs of his hooks are. In that particular knockdown there, let's just rewind that for a moment. From a technical perspective, let's take a look at this for a second. So he's thrown a big left hook. Look how low his right hand is. Okay, he's not protecting himself here at all. And then watch when he throws the left hook as well. The second time, the left hook's coming from a low position and the right hand's still down. You see here as well how wide the hooks are. Look at the arcs. If Whyte can throw inside the arc of those hooks, as he likes to dip down off the line as well, he could potentially be catching Tyson Fury. You saw that left hook there land as well. You'll see a right hook land here, right there. And there's a slight pause, and then Fury gets right back at it. The point is, look how low that right hand is here as he's trying to pour with that jab to set up that right hand to the body. Deontay Wilder here is falling on his heels. He's off balance. He's in no position to throw a counterattack. That might not be happening with Dillian Whyte. So Tyson Fury's got to be careful here. Even here where the stoppage came, that last shot that landed was a left hook from Deontay Wilder. Now, he was getting pummeled here, right? So I'm not suggesting that it was any significant shot. But the point is, when Fury gets excited and wants to take a guy out, his sole focus is how to swing in big shots, big hooks, but he's swinging them in. Okay, they're not launched in what is a traditionally technically correct way. So that's something to look out for. But in terms of this famed Dillian Whyte left hook, is there something that we're potentially overlooking? Is it possible that Tyson Fury will turn up fighting southpaw? If he does this, this could potentially take away the left hook of Dillian Whyte. So we've seen him on the pads working from a southpaw position. And I just want to show you here the way he tucks his chin, behind that lead shoulder against Derek Chisora. You'll see different angles of this, but I want you to try and understand the distance of what he's doing here. You see how that left hook, where would that left hook land? It could only really land on the top of the head, and because it would have to travel upwards, Tyson Fury would see that and he'd have a lot of time to see it. So what happens is, see how it's tucked? Look at that chin behind that shoulder. It's essentially enabling him to then jab from a high position downwards, or in this case, he's flicking it up to Chisora's face. By this point, Chisora was battered and bruised though, so he's not looking great at all. But the point is, he's able to have the vantage point advantage, so to speak, from the height advantage that he has from shooting that jab, and potentially take away the lead hand of Dillian Whyte, which is his best hand. Now, if he's able to do this, it becomes a question mark of Tyson Fury's backhand against Dillian Whyte's backhand, unless Dillian Whyte is able to really get the angles on his side. Look at that though, the distance that he's generating behind that. So there's a potential that he tries to do that. This would require great reflexes and really good movement. Does he still have that as part of his game? Or has Tyson Fury slowed down? I don't think he moves quite as quickly as he used to. And like I said, here he's not moving particularly quickly. In this particular example, Chisora's already been battered. But Tyson Fury was a wonderful mover. In the second Deontay Wilder fight, I showed you in the preview for the third fight of theirs, how Fury was reacting to the step forward jab by Deontay Wilder when he was trying to set up that long right hand. He would instantly react and move backwards. In the third fight, that wasn't happening as quickly. And instead, at points, particularly as the fight moved on and he seemed to tire, he started to try and smother the right hand instead of moving away from it. And there was that moment where he got dropped, of course. There was another moment in the ninth where he got caught with a couple of big shots. Now, it could just be that, you know, he had a very difficult preparation for that fight. Obviously, his daughter was in a life-threatening situation, and for all you guys that have seen Rocky, until Adrian, who's in intensive care, turns to him and says, "Go win, Rock, I want you to win," or whatever it is she says to him, his mind's not in the game. That could just be the case. He just wasn't as sharp because he didn't train properly. But the alternative is that Father Time is starting to catch up with Tyson Fury, and if he's not moving as well as he used to, and he is going to try and walk Dillian Whyte down, then I certainly would not suggest that he does it out of a southpaw stance. He'd be better served going orthodox when he is up close to try and swarm and smother the attacks of Dillian Whyte, try and lean on him, try and break his construct. And where he is good is getting a guy off balance, using that lead arm to break a guy's construct, use head control, and then start ripping hooks into the body. And also uppercuts up close. Fury's very good at these things. If he's able to do that and disrupt Dillian Whyte and be more physical with Whyte and be the stronger guy, then he could potentially win in more ways than one. If he's not the stronger guy, though, and Whyte is able to keep him off and throw hooks inside the arc of Tyson Fury, it could be a very difficult fight for Tyson Fury. I still think, however, there's too much left in the tank for Fury here. Stylistically, I think I've shown how I think he's going to be able to mess with Dillian Whyte's guard. I think stylistically he's wrong for Dillian Whyte, although I do think this will be a very good fight, a very entertaining fight. There's a lot of dog in Whyte. I give him about 20% chance. I think if they were to fight 5 times, I think Dillian might get the better of it on one occasion, maybe 25%, 1 in 4. But I still have to lean towards Tyson Fury unless we see that his legs are gone. He does seem to be lighter. Based on the training footage we've seen a bit of a wobbly belly. A lot of people have mentioned that, and they've said he looks in terrible shape. To me, he looks slimmer. It just looks like he's got very loose skin. Skin is kind of like an elastic band. When you overstretch it, it's not going to go back into the way that it was. This is why a lot of people have facelifts, or why a lot of people that have incredible amounts of weight loss have to then go and have surgery to cut off the skin. It doesn't just, hug your body like it used to. So don't confuse the wobbly skin with him looking in terrible shape. Tyson Fury looks trimmer to me, and we'll see. Time will tell when they get on the scales, but he looks trimmer to me, or at least in better shape than he did in that third Wilder fight. Let me know what you think. I'm not going to be able to see this fight live, believe it or not. I'm an Orthodox Christian. It's our Holy Week, so it's Easter for us on Sunday. So Saturday night, I'll be in church. I'll be avoiding my phone and the internet like the plague to see the fight the next day. So I probably won't be bringing you the review until Monday, because Sunday's obviously our Easter. I'm off to my mum's. So I'll be avoiding the world until Monday, and I'll let you guys know what I've thought of the fight. Please let me know your thoughts as well. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take care. God bless. Please hit that like button, subscribe button, and notifications button too.